Everyone's got it. Got it.
All right, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Public Safety Committee of the City of Monona for Wednesday, December 28th. And do I have a motion to approve the minutes of our September 28th meeting?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve from Joe. Is there a second? Second. And are there any suggestions for changes, edits, updates, anything that you saw when you were looking through that didn't seem quite right? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as presented in the packet? Say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. Let's move on to then appearances. I don't believe there are any, but are there any folks from the community that are here?
None who have logged on and none no registrants.
Okay, fantastic. So there is no unfinished business. So we're moving on to number 6 on the agenda to new business, and I'm going to hand it over to our two chiefs, starting with Chief Cheney. Discussion/action on right-of-way safety ordinance.
Thank you, PSC. Hopefully everyone had a good holiday. Merry Christmas. I brought this up by way of request to this body at the last meeting. I'll be brief in saying that we're starting to experience some push by way of the city of Madison that has an existing similar ordinance starting to really enforce their ordinance, which is starting to push the problems our way. So I really want to get ahead of this. However, I want to do it right. So I had a wonderful dispatcher help me do a lot of research into what other communities are doing to include the city of Madison and looking at their language. I think Wauwatosa was another, and there might have been a couple others that were looked at. And so she came to me with sort of, here's what the other agencies are doing. She phoned, I think, another agency as well to get some sort of feedback. And we piecemealed a combination of language from both Wauwatosa and the city of Madison. I put all that together. I originally sent it out to you all, but I, missed a step. I needed to hear back from our city attorney. He did have it, but I sent it to you too soon. So I got feedback from him. There was added language and some correction and legal format. And then the latest version that I sent to you is what has been approved by our city attorney. So what this ordinance does is that it doesn't allow individuals to stand, other than waiting for traffic or in the process of crossing the road, to stand for any other purpose than that. So what you commonly see here are people soliciting for rides illegally, asking for rides like hitchhiking, or people who are asking for money or donations or whatever and handling. This would prohibit that in public right-of-ways, to include the median, to include the area immediately adjacent to the roadway. They are allowed to occupy or walk on a sidewalk as long as it's not obstructing. You can't ban that. And panhandling, asking for money or asking for something, material object, in and of itself is legal. We cannot ban that particular behavior. It's protected under your First Amendment right, as indicated by the federal appellate courts, because the city of Madison got sued. I was a part of that. Not responsible, but I was there when it happened. So lessons learned for all of us, but so that we have to sort of tread the line here in examining why we're having this ordinance. Well, it's for safety reasons, right? We've seen it, I'm sure many of you have seen it time and time again, where persons have not moved once their light turned from red to green because they're handing something out the window, or when you have people, persons who are asking for money, walk into the street to solicit or ask door to door, car to car persons. That creates a safety issue. And so that's really what we're looking at here when it comes to this ordinance, and why we called it a right-of-way safety ordinance versus what other municipalities call it, like Madison. Madison, for example, calls it a median safety ordinance, because we wanted to extend it beyond just the middle median. We wanted to do it sort of by this the edges of the roads. We don't have too many sidewalks in this town, I think, as you all know. So instead, we're calling it the right of way. And the right of way is different depending on the location. It's not standard for all of our roadways. It can be 10 foot in excess of the actual road in one part of town and shorter distance in another part of town, depending on the geographical location. So that's it in a nutshell. My plan is, Public Works, I should tell you, was involved in this too. So we had our Public Works Director, Dan Stefani. Brad looked into this as well. Brad actually helped provide the map that hopefully you all got to. I am not asking that the map be included in the ordinance because that might change. However, I'm looking to make a right-of-way safety ordinance pamphlet, similar that as the city of Madison created, in which we can hand out to members of the public when we start enforcing this. Or if council says to the police, we will approve this, but we want a 30-day window before you enforce it to allow time for the public to be informed and educated, etc. I will tell you that even if you didn't, the council didn't have that time frame, I, as the police chief, will likely implement that educational period anyway before I start enforcing this to give people the chance to adjust and to learn about the new changes here. Because they're coming. We see it every day. We see the increased volume of people. In fact, I had to give a warning to an individual who crossed in violation of the red light at on Broadway and Cops, right by the Denny's Menards, because they were just trying to cross the street to get to the Speedway, but they were occupying the median there lawfully because we have nothing that prohibits that, asking for money. So it's becoming an issue so much that somebody's cutting in front of the chief of police while they're driving down the street. So I'm sure it's an issue for you all because I'm not out and about as often as you guys are.
Questions? So I'm glad you brought up the map because when I first looked at it, I could imagine how it might create more questions.
Mhm.
A person might look at it and say, oh, this ordinance only applies to the area in red.
Right.
Why?
So you can't create an outright the whole city rule as it relates to the right-of-way ordinance. The reason being is because there's some parts of the city where, I mean, how do you define a right-of-way when there's no
Right.
sidewalk?
Right.
You can have somebody plot out there and put some, but it's really difficult to define. And then there's also an issue to be said about safety. The areas that are outlined in red are some of our more high-density areas. And we see a lot more sort of commercial traffic traveling in that direction, like, the cut through on Bridge, for example, or Winona Drive, etc. It's not a cut through, but we all know that's what it's used for.
It's the shortcut.
Yes, yes. So in consultation with, because I really put this on Public Works, I said, here's from a police perspective, from a sort of law enforcement perspective, what we're seeing. But I want you to give me your perspective as sort of safety and as it relates to streets and populated roads, etc. And so this is what Public Works and Police came up with, and why it's limited just to these, what we would consider major thoroughfares.
Thank you. A few points or questions. I made some notes so I wouldn't forget. These are high traffic areas, and the types of folks that this would affect are low income 9 times out of 10, perhaps?
On the enforcement side of it?
Yes.
Because there is language that, the answer is probably, but maybe not.
Okay.
Probably is because generally speaking, persons who I've encountered in my career that are panhandling are likely lower income or other issues. However, not always.
Right.
I think we've seen
Like
some
the
Dateline
professional,
specials on
right,
that.
not the professional.
Yes.
I'm not talking.
So that's enforcing
that.
the person asking for money. However, this ordinance also prohibits the person providing money, right? So it's like hitchhiking. It's illegal for you to pick up a hitchhiker, and it's illegal for you to hitchhike. The same rule applies here. It's illegal for you to ask for money in these prohibited areas, and it's illegal for you to provide person in violation money as well.
That's interesting, didn't know that. And would they get a warning? Or would they be issued a financial ticket? And is this gonna put a burden on folks that don't need the burden? I'm just,
Yeah.
that kind of
Maybe brought
bothers
that up.
me.
It is how I operate and how my officers will operate. In fact, I've gotten feedback, not feedback, I've gotten a lot of inquiries as to, chief, why are you and your officers writing so many warnings when they should be writing tickets? Right. And so my argument is, well, our goal is to educate, right? I am not the fundraising police, although it may seem, this is Alder Thomas. Logging in remotely. Although it may seem, because I'm trying to raise money for some other things that are
Right,
related to. Education is important, and it's important for me to allow and to give officers discretion, because every case is going to be unique, every case is going to be different. Now, I will tell you that if an officer is well aware of an individual, has already provided direction, resources, educated on this ordinance, then at some point a warning isn't going to cut it. We only have so many tools on our belt, so the other tool that we have is a ticket enforcement. Then if they want to go to court and there's some other community service or some other avenues for to address this, that's where it happens. But we are going to do an educational period. I haven't necessarily determined how long that's going to be, just to make sure that the public is aware and persons who may be found in violation are aware. I can tell you that we're probably seeing, generally speaking, the same handful of individuals that are out there. And so if we implement this, it won't take too long for that educational piece to start. But then, of course, because we are where we're positioned geographically in Madison or the area, we're going to get newcomers.
Right.
So we're going to have to start this whole new thing again, which is why I want to create a pamphlet to give officers, and the officers can hand out information that not only describes what our ordinance is, but gives the resources available in Madison for folks who need help.
And that was gonna be my next question, I know you want to do the map and education, but what is the plan? I'd be interested in, what is your plan? What does your timeline look like? Cause this could be messy.
Well, it can or can't. In my opinion, I think it's, you're likely dealing with the same handful of individuals who we've seen out there for some time now. The officers know them by name. Oftentimes because people complain about panhandlers and the officers they respond to make sure it's safe, but then they have to get a hold of the complainant saying, well, there's no law against it. There is in Madison, because people are well familiar with Madison's laws, because they've been enforcing it over a year now.
At least
2 years, maybe. But there's nothing in Monona. So I don't know what time frame. Off the top of my head, I can think of like a 30-day window of education and enforcement, but that's not. I don't want to put a absolute window on that, because what if you have somebody who you've talked to, you spent 20 minutes talking to, they're aware of the ordinance, to your understanding, and then they're back the following day, or the day after that, or back the day after that. At what point are you going to enforce the ordinance? So that's why I would like to leave it as a case by case, but to allow this general enforcement period to last between 2 to 3 weeks, unless council dictates otherwise.
And then it'll be resources that are available.
Well, that are county supported, so we will provide persons to, shelter resources, to other nonprofit entities that are out there. There's a new men's shelter on the east side, the old Savers lot. The Salvation Army offers housing for women and families, or hotels for families. So we'll have a list of resources that will provide people. The challenge is, there's a variety of factors involved in each unique person's case. Will they take the resources? Do they have the capacity to understand what the resources are based on the limited contact that the officers have with them? More often than not, an officer is going to probably offer a ride, especially if it's somebody new. Will offer a ride.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, but if it's once they return, and it's our tool belt's limited at that point. So as much as I don't want to be the ticket police, at some point a ticket is appropriate, because there's other avenues after us that go into effect, that the court has discretion. But I get what you're saying, and they can make payment plans, they can work it off through community service or whatever the municipal judge wants, however he wants to handle it. But we ourselves, we don't have those options, and so our option is warning, education, and if there seems to be a non-compliance, it's ticket and or arrest.
How much is the ticket?
That hasn't been established yet either. Yeah, it's up to the discretion of the council. You can recommend what the fee will be. There's a cap to that. I don't know what our cap is offhand. I don't know if Lieutenant Amigo, if you can hear me, if you know what like, for example, our DC cap would be, because I think the violation for this would constitute something similar to either DC or a traffic.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not aware.
I really appreciate the points that Ms. Davis is bringing forward. I really do. And if I understand correctly, was there one or two warnings? That was the plan, when you say what is your plan? Was the plan that one or two warnings would be issued, or just one and done and then straight to citation, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, my plan would be, I would offer, and again, I haven't narrowed down this sort of period of time in which I expect the officers to do education, but there will be a period of time. Off the top of my head, I can guess 2 to 3 weeks, right? In which you would, officers would have these pamphlets ready in hand, they'd be out in the streets, but I don't want to confuse that with, we will not be issuing tickets within 3 weeks. Because again, how many times are you going to give somebody a warning?
Correct. So the education period serves as a warning.
Yes.
And the officers, like you say, they know these folks very well. They know who already had received a pamphlet, who hadn't.
Yes. And then it's at their discretion to issue a citation or not.
Okay.
And, arguably, although ignorance of the law technically isn't a defense, but arguably somebody can go to court and say, listen, I've been doing this for a year now, and I never received a pamphlet, never received a warning. And I didn't know about this, and the officer thought that I had, but he himself or she herself had not spoken to me about this. They thought another officer did. That wasn't the case. That might be a defense they might want to bring to court, and the judge would take that into consideration. But we're going to do our part to make sure we're confident that somebody's been educated. We're not out there to arrest or cite individuals who, are out there struggling. Right? We're not trying to create additional burden for people. But it's a safety issue.
Yeah, could you speak more to that? Like, why is this, if someone reads about this in the newspaper, why is this really all about safety and not about something else that we don't want to think about, right? Why?
Right. It's similar to why, I don't want to relive this, but it's appropriate. So why there was a very large, robust debate about sidewalks on Winnequa. People in cars, especially high traffic, high volume areas, do not mix well. Pedestrians in high volume areas do not mix well. The best, and I think the engineers, I'm not one, but I've talked to a lot and I've been in a lot of processes, have said the best thing to do is to separate the two. When you're talking about why we're creating this ordinance, it's for safety. And the issue, the risk is twofold. It's number one, the person or persons occupying their space. And mind you, there's nothing against the law about children occupying these spaces either. And we've gotten several calls about an adult and their children occupying the medium. There's nothing, the children all are watched, they're all contained within the area. The officers aren't observing them going into traffic. But as we all know, children do childish things, and there's that risk. However, there's no actual violation of the law that's happening there. And so we have to leave, although the officers do their best to try to convince parents to move their children and offer the resources, etc. But there's no teeth to our bark that we can enforce them from moving from that space without this ordinance, right? So there's a safety risk with the pedestrian being in the area, and we already have enough distracted drivers in this community. People on their phones, people on their radio, people looking where they shouldn't be looking. And so now what we're experiencing is people being distracted by a person in which you're trying to read their sign, or they're having conversations with them, or the person's behind them think it's a green light, they're going to go and no, I'm going to stay here at this green light because I'm waiting to give this person money. It creates a safety issue on a variety of different fronts.
Which, to my mind, the place I'm familiar with this on is the Southtown exit, which I can just imagine something going wrong on a rush hour of a weekday
Yeah,
with these sorts of things.
On the
It's a
ramp.
major burden for a lot of people.
right. I'm glad that we're having this conversation because my thoughts were, oh, that's so unfortunate that this person needs to do this, but they're not causing any harm. And that's always been my thought, like, it's, what can it hurt? Big deal. It's,
Yeah, and what we're, I don't have any data to prove how many crashes are caused by, because the person panhandling isn't a checked box in the state's form that we fill out that says this person was a contributing factor. It's the driver who, was inattentive driving or, didn't maneuver where they were how they were supposed to maneuver, et cetera. So we don't have any data which we collect, but I can almost venture to say that there's a high likelihood that some distraction was involved when persons are panhandling or were on the off ramp to Southtown, for example. I can't say with certainty, but based on my experience, I'd have to guess that has been a factor in the past.
And I understood you, I believe you said that it would be common for the officer to offer the person a ride to a safe location, to a shelter, to
It depends.
someplace.
It depends. So a lot of people don't know, this group knows because you're public safety and you've heard police chiefs in here for years on end. But we have 2 officers per shift generally that work for the entire city of Monona, even though we're a small community. But geographically speaking, that's a
Yeah.
big area of responsibility,
Right,
from Atwood to the Beltline and beyond.
I think I know what you're saying, yeah.
So we don't have the luxury or the
Exactly.
resources to
Right.
drive somebody downtown Madison during
Right.
rush hour.
Right,
We have to be available for you all or the next call on the Beltline or the Walmart.
of
So
course,
as much as the officers may want and their heart is in it, and
Right.
sometimes it's hard for them to make that decision.
right,
Like, listen, I can't get you here, but I can get you at least off the median.
Sure.
I can drive you,
yeah,
down the block, or I can escort you, whatever. More often than not, we're coming in contact with persons that don't want that help. That are aware of some of these resources that exist. And I think that a lot of them are from the area, or at least have spent some time in the area. And they're no longer on, Buckeye Road, for example, because Madison PD has enforced their ordinance. And it's been part of their enforcement efforts on the east side or the south side. What they found is that, we tell them when we're called, hey, we're concerned about you out here, make sure you know about these resources. We don't want you to stand here, but there's nothing we can do to move you from here, and they know that. I'm speaking in general terms, because again, it's the same individuals that we're coming in contact with that are occupying these areas right now.
And also you'll see there is no exception there for the fire department.
True.
So the
Correct.
MDA stuff goes away.
Correct.
We will not be collecting cleaning and the streets anymore. We'll find another location to off the street. But I can speak personally to close calls in Madison with the MDA stuff with our folks wearing vests of people almost getting hit. So that was brought up in the Madison ordinance coming up, and it was a very hot topic of discussion. We want to make sure we're not sending mixed messages with this, so our folks will also not be doing that going forward. So we'll find alternatives to.
Filling the boot in a safe location.
Yep.
these are all really good conversations, I can see myself having to speak to this if you won't yourself at council, because I think my colleagues would also have similar questions and. Having just recently been appointed to the DEI committee, and I know my colleagues feel the same about these matters, and we're not trying to. Make anyone's life more difficult than it already is, right?
Right.
So,
I think, if I can just speak on that point, I get it. I
Yeah.
100% get it, and I too appreciate the questions, because I don't wanna, as I sit here and have been doing this job and coming from Madison and being part of their process, I just assume people know.
Yeah.
And it's great when I have these questions, because it's like, oh yeah, this is why that, this ordinance, or this is why this is being proposed. So thank you for that. But I'd also say that we also have to keep a close eye. I love not working for Madison now and associating with this community, and I brag about it every day. But I think I, as chief, and Jerry can probably speak to this, we'd be foolish not to pay attention as to what's happening
Sure.
all around us, because
Sure.
it's going to impact us.
Right.
And I saw this sort of coming, and to be honest, this has been put on my back burner while I've been getting some policy and some, my opinion, higher priority issues addressed within the police department. This was on my to-do list very early on, and I had earlier meetings with Madison Police commanders about their future enforcement activities that were going to be taking place as relates to their ordinance. And sort of a heads up, this issue that we've been struggling with might be coming your way. And what I mean by that is issues that relates to, 10 people arguing over a panhandling location on Stolen Road and 30, or families occupying the roads. And even though it's not against the law now, it doesn't mean the police don't get calls. And that's a calls for service that your police department
Yeah.
has to respond to and investigate.
As opposed to
Pulls
other,
away from
right,
other.
right.
Yeah, so these are all the things that I'm sort of thinking of when introducing an ordinance like this, proposed ordinance.
Very good. And you said that this language that we're reading tonight has already been approved by the city attorney, so it is good to go.
Correct.
Are we being asked to take action and to approve this tonight?
Yes, my request to you is to provide any recommendations to move the council with approval of this ordinance, or make any amendments so that I can add to that any conditions, any fee recommendations, et cetera, that I can add and send to council.
I think the fee should be at least consistent, but we don't know what that is. So it's kind of hard to.
Consistent with the city of Madison's?
Well, our
With our other
our
Yeah.
fees.
fees, okay.
On that-
Our fees.
Thank you. And because Madison was brought up on that point, Madison has a progressive fees structure as it relates to this ordinance. First violation is $92.50.
Ooh,
Second violation is $187. Third violation is $313. Fourth violation is $439. And $439 outside of their OWI violation is one of their highest violations. Again, this is somebody, based on my experience in working for Madison, these are, it's not, you're cited, I got 3 complaints on you, so I'm gonna respond and issue you 3 complaints. This is, I've already cited you once, 1 week, 3 weeks later, I'm back. Choosing to use my discretion to cite you again, 3 weeks later, choosing to cite you again, and each time, it's increased.
I thought you were gonna say $50.
me too.
So I'm saying I'm not recommending we go with
Sure.
the high dollar amounts. I don't know if we can. I think our fee schedule might cap out at a certain, well, I know it does, level. But it wouldn't be that, you could recommend $50. I mean, this body can do that.
I appreciate that we're looking at data from other communities and not reinventing the wheel. That's intelligent. Has there been any data collected from Madison in terms of how's this going so far? Are people paying their fees, or are they spending time in jail
Or court.
or court? And how's that working?
What is demographics? Look, I'm curious about demographics too.
How long has Madison had this in place? Maybe it's too soon to collect any data.
I don't think it was around, Mark, when you were there, was it? No?
No, we were still working on it right before I left. I remember several meetings on it, so it hasn't been in effect that long.
And it's
Probably not in the
Couple
enforcement
years,
phase,
Do you happen to know the number of the ordinance violation that the citation would read? I can.
Yes,
if you-
12.325 for Madison General Ordinance, 12.325. And it's labeled entering or staying upon highways restricted. And they've short-termed it to say median safety ordinance.
Probably do a CCAP search or something, but,
And I will tell you that the reason I pause as it relates to their data, I am no longer
sure.
at liberty to access.
Right, of course.
Sure.
It's an ongoing struggle with
Right.
me and my former counterparts at Madison to get data.
Right.
I am just like you now.
Right,
So,
exactly.
it will likely have to be an open records request, and that will take
A
a
while.
long time.
A long time, yeah.
Unless you can get a hold of Your counterparts.
I don't know. Let's see. I don't know. This would not be referred to the DA's office, so I'm kind of out of luck there too.
Or I'm saying another Madison council member
Sure,
that might have
sure,
more
yeah.
ready access.
For sure, for sure, yeah, good thinking. What's the temperature in general in the room? How do we feel about this?
Well, maybe one more question. Was there any discussion in drafting or in talking with the city attorney about the definition of right of way? Because that's something I wrestled with a little bit the first time I read that, and maybe the pamphlet is ultimately a platform for that. But are there gonna be ambiguity issues in terms of explaining that to people, defining it, having people challenge that?
The reason that's not in there is because it wasn't articulated, and that's an interesting point. It was in there in one of the earlier drafts. But it was removed as a definition in that real quick, while it's out here.
So,
Go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to call on Kathy, who's got her hand raised.
Alder
so I
Thomas?
would just remind people that we have a judge. And he can set the fine if he thinks what people are, that the thing is unreasonable. He can reduce it. He can, forgive them, let them off until next time. But I think that when you do these kinds of things, you do them because you want to give the police and the judge the ability, when there are people who are strong violators, to do this, because then the judge enters into it and may make modifications to things if he thinks that it's unreasonable, or if the person had a cause for doing whatever they were doing. So I am for opting for the, for doing the higher side of it, and letting the judge decide what is the right thing to do in each individual case.
To answer your question, Mr. Fontaine, I'm trying to look back here to see if the language was struck by the city attorney or the public works director. It was originally in there, but one of them proposed striking that language. I can't minimize my screen because I'm recording right now, and my phone option is not giving me that email. One of the two recommended that be struck.
Okay.
I think because in terms of what my understanding is that it depends on what a right of way is. You're either on private property or on public property on the street. And the exemptions are listed, is my understanding. Like the sidewalk, you're in the median while you're crossing or waiting for the crossing to take place. But outside of that, I can't remember specifically who recommended that. I'll continue to check as this meeting goes on.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, maybe that's just a pamphlet point to put that in lay terms there, because, if I'm struggling with it as a state government policy employee, that people will too.
Yes.
Are we ready to take a vote on this, or do we wait?
I have a quick question.
Please.
Chief could just, because things have changed over the years. What happens if you do get 2 or 3 of these tickets and you fail to appear for court? I know you used to be able to arrest them on a municipal warrant, you would go to jail, but then I don't know if it was City of Madison or if it's a statewide thing where that got switched to, went to collections. What happens to these if you do get the failure to appear on these, and now they're stacking up on certain people that have decided that they're not going to follow the ordinance?
Yeah, currently the judge has limited sort of powers, any municipal judge does, as it relates to especially juveniles. I mean, it's only their worker's permit or their driver's license that they have some sort of control over. For adults, we're not, those days are gone, Mark, where we used to sort of take the stack of unpaid city ordinance tickets and the judge issues a warrant for somebody and they get, however many days per violation or per fine amount. This is oftentimes it goes to collections, but there's other resources that are out there and nonprofits that handle these for people. if it does go that way, and there's sort of. Some language and, if you can't afford it, you can provide. Community service in lieu of payment, that sort of thing that judges have some discretion over, but. More often than not, it is the city's out of the money. And we see that now with speeding tickets and people move out of state, blah, 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 they never had a license, so, or could get a license, so. We don't see the money recouped.
But the chances of somebody who fails to appear in court or gets these, the chance of them actually going to jail is pretty slim, right?
Yeah,
Is my-
it's not gonna go to warrant necessarily.
Right. Okay.
The only time in which we would bring somebody to jail is for the behavior that's not as simple as this.
Mhm.
It is like an FU cop, and by the way, I'm gonna stand in the middle of the street and do this if I want to. If we have a sense that somebody is non-compliant, it's ticket first, and if we have a sense that they're not gonna comply with that ticket, we have a duty to do something with that person so that they don't endanger the public. Because they're articulating that they're not gonna comply, and likely that's a trip to jail. Well, for alternatives, because that's more paperwork for the cops, right? We like the path of least resistance, but unfortunately, again, we only have so many tools in our tool belts, and it's let's try to work with you. Let's try to educate you. If that's not going to work, or we get the sense that that's not going to work, it's a citation. If we get the sense that that's not going to work, it's another citation potentially, or jail if in egregious cases. Yeah. And by the way, jail, you get the person's probably out by the time the cops get their paperwork done. But we have to do something with the person.
Is this body interested in?
You're muted all.
Kathy's done.
Oh, Kathy, Alder Thomas, did you have another point?
Is there a motion on the floor? I
As
came
we
in late, so if there's a motion, I missed it.
Oh. I'm sorry, Alder Thomas, are you asking for me to call for a motion to take a vote?
Well, I'm assuming that the chief would like a recommendation to the council.
Yes,
Is there a motion to vote on this measure this evening?
I move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so all in favor, so is there, so we're gonna take a vote then on this measure to send it to council. As it is in the packet tonight verbatim, is there? All in favor of approving the language for council? Yes.
I would say
Oh,
aye.
I'm sorry, is there a question on
It
the
is a
floor?
question.
And my apologies for
okay.
the sloppy rules of
That's
order here.
okay.
That's
That's
okay,
okay.
Ms. Davis.
I think we should give the council some type of recommendation on the fee. I mean, then they're you all are sitting there like us, wonder what it is, or that, or even the amount that we heard from a city that's across the street from us is so expensive. And I just don't feel good about that at all. So I'm back to $50, $35, $50, and then it kind of a step up. It's a thought, but we need to give the council something to work with.
if I may. We're dealing with a situation right now in which a resident has had multiple violations of allowing her animal to run at large, which is disturbing neighbors. And when I say multiple, I mean dozens. And that person each time, after warning and education, et cetera, is outright refusing to comply. We're citing them the same amount of violation each time. So I don't necessarily think that there should be a
okay.
progression, in my
Okay.
opinion. But the violation can be issued at
Multiple
each
times.
I
event.
see. That makes
And then
sense.
the court can address it, or the city attorney can plea it down or
That
whatever,
makes sense.
at a later date. It just makes it easier.
And consistent
Yeah.
across the board.
So Ms. Davis brings up a city that's right across the street. I think of Monona Drive, depending on the direction you're traveling, you're either in Madison or Monona. Are you sort of getting at that geographic situation where you have people over here, it costs you $50, over here it costs you $150? Is that what you mean? Or
I was just thinking of the expense. It was just so expensive. But if we started just straight up flat fee of $50 to start and see how it goes. Unless someone has another
Was
idea.
is there alignment with the fee schedule that
See,
we'd be
that's-
able to get more information on? Cause it's, I mean, I don't know the fee schedule off the top of my head at all, and maybe that's gonna look reasonable when we see it, and maybe it's not, I don't know.
That's true.
you know, this sort of sounds to me like I oftentimes use the analogy if I'm driving on the road and something's just not quite right. Do you put your foot on the gas or do you put it on the brake, right? So maybe this is just, it sounds like there's more than just about any other meeting I've sat through. It sounds like there's some questions out there and waiting a month is not gonna hurt. If folks feel really uncomfortable or, I mean, I would be willing to.
There
do
is
it.
a there's a cost to taking people to court. We have to pay the attorney, we have to pay the police overtime, we have to do all of this other stuff. And if the higher fee is not warranted, both the lawyer can plea it down and the judge can adjust it. But it is not cheap to take someone to court it costs the taxpayers a lot of money. Much more than $50.
And I
Point
understand.
taken.
I
Point
totally
taken.
understand, but I'm also thinking of people that may not have the attorney that is going to advocate for them.
And I think the fees that Alder Thomas is referring to is just the rate that the judge is paid, the use of the building and things like that.
Can I recommend if you're sort of contemplating a friendly amendment, which it sounds like you are, a fee no more than, so at least give some counsel what your threshold is as a committee as to the top dollar amount.
Well, to Kathy's point, I think my version of what I'm hearing from Kathy is in practice, whatever this number is gonna be a maximum anyway. And it is likely that in a lot of cases, the judge may knock it down if it gets to him. So that goes back to, I think, your point, Chief, about tools in the toolbox.
Right.
I'd wanna set some sort of maximum that allows for the very serious offenders, that there may be cases in, we can think of cases where you don't wanna charge some unfortunate person a high number, but you can also think of cases where a repeat offender deserves something more than 50 too.
Does this committee usually suggest, I guess I don't recall when we were talking about the noise ordinance and things like that. Is it? Are we supposed to give the council a number, or is that what the council does because they have an idea of the schedule of fees and so on and so forth? I'm just kind of historically, what do we typically do?
As-
Frequently the attorney recommends there is a scale on what fees and fines are. And frequently the attorney gets involved in where it fits in the fee schedule. And again, it goes into the judge has discretion, the attorney has discretion, but you also sometimes people are egregious in their violations, and you need to make sure that you can deal with the egregious cases. And I can tell you that if you've ever been to our court, our judge is pretty reasonable in terms of reducing stuff or listening to people if people have a reasonable case on why they did it, if they can't afford it. I mean, it's not like, the Judge Judy where she's, the judge is pretty reasonable about stuff, I think. And bases every case on the merits. And you have to have those things which take care of people. And again, our attorney costs us $300, $500 an hour. So if he goes for one case, we got to pay for the attorney. If we have to pay a cop overtime, we have to pay for that. So you and I and the taxpayers, you're going to make them pay for taking someone to court for breaking the law. And we have tried not to make people responsible for the ill doings of others in terms of making them pay for it. We try and at least make it cover the cost of the going to trial, which is more expensive than you might imagine.
Yeah.
So I can say, just legally speaking, I'm not the attorney, city attorney, obviously, and I apologize, can't access the fee schedule that is brought before council, but it's, all the fees are listed there. There's a legal limit as to the maximum amount that's allowed under law in which we can, but I get at the questions related to this particular ordinance. And I personally am not a member of this body, but I think that it would be reasonable to perhaps articulate a top dollar amount that you feel is not compassionate for persons who might be cited under this ordinance, but what that is, I don't know. I will also say that I'll play sort of the other side of this card and say that we don't do that for anything else. You don't do that for speed violations where somebody doesn't have the money and we cite the dollar amount. You don't do that for disorderly conduct if somebody's got, an issue that day and is having a breakdown, blah, 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 and we have to cite based on X, Y, and Z. We don't do that in anything else. We've made marijuana in essence legal here, which I support, in Monona, because we didn't want to charge $1 because that would be a lot of money for the city to have to pay for that attorney and all these things that Alder Thomas is speaking of. So I do get the argument or the consideration for wanting to sort of cap out what the dollar amount is. To Alder Thomas's point, I don't think that $30 is, I think the city would be in the hole if I start writing $30 tickets for these violations as our parking tickets, by the way. But do I believe we should be issuing $439 tickets for these violations? No. So maybe that's something that this body either gives recommendation on the dollar amount or says we want it to be reasonable given the circumstances of this ordinance, and let sort of council interpret what reasonable is,
Well,
and the city attorney's input.
If we pass the motion on the floor with no amendment to that point whatsoever. And let's assume this all passes through, it triggers a fee schedule in ways that are going to be clear to the people who would be acting on a case, correct?
It has to.
Yeah. And if, to your point, the fee schedule is what we use elsewhere, it's meant to recognize the costs, it's meant to be a maximum that does get knocked down in practice. I'm sympathetic to your point of saying, why are we saying it here when we haven't said it anywhere else? And does that open the door into that discussion? Maybe people want to open the door into that discussion. I can see that. But, I'm disinclined to make one exception because this is what's in front of us now, and have that be its own challenge going forward.
I agree.
And I would speak, like, just 100% speaking as a former Madison member as well. My thought is this, the citation should match Madison's for its first offense. Because that takes away that whole, well, I'm gonna be on this side, so it's $92, that's a pretty common municipal ordinance citation fee, that range. But that way, we don't have to make it ramp up. It can be a flat 92 each time, but that way both sides of the street are the same cost. And again, that's strictly my opinion. I actually agree that I don't necessarily think this is the body for setting specific fee amounts. That's more of a council discussion on how to amend the fee schedule. I think if there's specific reasons to amend it over what we normally do for municipal.
But even on the council level, obviously not a council member, I'd rather have that be a discussion about the fee schedule than case by case, this ordinance and then this ordinance and then this ordinance.
All right, is there any more discussion?
Just for clarification, you are not making an amendment then? So I just for strictly, trust me on that, I'm not trying to say yay, or do this or do that, because I don't have the power to do
I
that
should have
anyway.
asked that, thank you much.
But I like what the chief said about the side of the street.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
I'm assuming the council will take that into consideration when they have this discussion.
and I think what I also heard the chief say is that we can start with the same
Mhm.
amount, but we don't have to ramp it up in the same way
Mhm.
that Madison does. And that could also be a conversation for council. So are we ready to take a vote? Is there a motion?
We didn't have a second to the motion, did we?
Yeah, Mark did it.
Mark's for
We
Okay.
did. And so in that case, all in favor of moving this new ordinance to council as proposed in the packet, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
okay, thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda under new business. B, discussion/update on hiring process for full-time and volunteers from Chief McMullen.
I have no actionable items tonight, so this is fabulous. Just a real quick update. We had a full-timer retire. Actually, he retired January 3rd. So we've been running a process. We got 3 applications for the position. We are moving one forward to the PSC for an interview in January.
January 23rd.
Excellent. And do we have a time that you know?
No, we're trying to figure out the time.
Because as soon as I have that, I'll create a letter for that applicant and send it out. With the expectation they'll be starting February 1st, which happens to be the start of their schedule swing, which will work out perfectly. Very qualified individual. Should be a hopefully pretty easy interview for the PSC. So, in the meantime, in January, we do have an empty full-time slot because our full-timer is retired. And our LTEs stepped up in a very big way, so they're covering actually all of the open shifts are covered by LTEs. As well as the time we're putting into the double ambulance staffing, so. Volunteers, we're having a volunteer process as well. Currently we're at 12, which we'll be interviewing the second week in January. With again, the start date of February 1st for this cohort of 12. We have 5 EMTs, we have 4 firefighters, a firefighter EMT, a firefighter advanced EMT, and 1 with no experience. So the cohort of 12 will all start together and move through the process together. So I actually might have 2 more by the time this comes around. So I'm working on another young lady. My time at Monona Grove a few weeks ago is paying off. So we've had 4 folks approach just after doing those 2 classes. So really good stuff.
Students from the high school are approaching.
Yes, one of the applicants that's in the list here is Kate Wall, Jessica Walsh's daughter. She actually already has her basic license.
Yes, she does.
And she was actually here last week. She's riding along again this next week. Very anxious to get started. One of our applicants, I think is Lily from the same class,
Oh, Lily, yeah.
Beckwith.
Oh.
So she's ridden along once, she's riding along again on Friday. And then we have young African-American young lady that was so taken by it that she's reached out since as well to start the process to see what she can do and what we can help them with. So we're all about getting folks licensed. So we'll pay for their basic classes. So we will get them licensed to get them worked into the system. And if they want to do firefighting, we'll do that as well. But we're more than willing to do single role EMTs as well as folks with fire experience. So really good stuff. Out of the last cohort of 12 we started last year, we kept 8 of them, I think, which is really good for volunteer rescue services. You usually get maybe 30 that stay after the first year. We have 7 folks coming off probation next week. So really good stuff. So that is my update on the full-time volunteers.
It's fantastic. Let's move on to the next item, 6C, discussion/update on double ambulance staffing. Also, Chief.
So this is just a real quick update. The council members are aware of this already. We started in October with trying to upstaff the second ambulance during the day. The data that I've got the last several years, most of our missed calls where we're out like we are right now, Medic 5 is coming in on a second call right now. because we're out on a call. But most of them happen between 6 and 6, Monday through Friday. 85% were missed calls. So we've tried to start up staffing during the day, so we have second ring in service basically from 7 to 5, 10-hour shifts with our FTEs. I've been staffing the ambulance myself quite a bit, to make sure we have 2 rigs in service. But to give you an idea, per capita in Dane County, we are the busiest ambulance in the county,
Wow.
without any exception whatsoever. We are by far and away the busiest.
Have a guess as to why that might be.
Because we're busy. We have Madison level calls with,
Okay.
right now we're on a scale, Madison is slightly behind us only because of the sheer number of calls, but they also have 250,000 people. Where they're running 10 calls for every 1,000 people, we're running in the neighborhood of 12 to 13 for every 1,000 people. So as of right now, as of today, actually, these numbers are already out of date because we've had 2 calls since I did this afternoon. We're at 1,678 calls so far this year. Because one of the things that I want to make sure that everybody is aware of, everybody around us does EMS. So Sun Prairie EMS, that when I compare us to Sun Prairie or Middleton or Fitch-Rona or DeForest or Wanakee, that's just EMS calls that they run. Our ambulance also does fire calls. So they respond to everything because that's our staff for the day. We have 2 people and it doesn't matter whether it's a heart attack that they just responded to or the gas leak we had earlier. The ambulance goes on everything. So this ambulance has ran almost 1,700 calls this year. So when I've said it since I've started that we need to have a second ambulance in service. The traditional number is around about 1,250 is when you need to start adding a second ambulance because of the number of missed calls. This year, Wanakee is adding a second ambulance, second full-time double medic staff ambulance. They have 1,100 calls this year, and they're adding a second ambulance. Deer Grove will have a second staffed ambulance within the next 2 years, and they're at 1,200 EMS calls this year. That's Fitch-Rona is adding a 4th because they're getting so busy. Sun Prairie is adding a 4th. Middleton runs 1,500 calls a year, and they've had 2 staffed ambulances for 8 or 9 years. DeForest is adding a second ambulance, and they're at 1,000 calls. So we're at 1,700. We've got to get a second ambulance in service. That is the #1 staffing issue facing us is we have to have a second ambulance. Beyond fire calls, beyond all, our fire calls are up 9% this year for non-EMS related fire calls. So everything, so like tonight we had engine 2 go out on both these EMS calls, but non-EMS fire related calls are up 9%. And that's the ones where we need to have our volunteers responding. We have fires, we have fire alarms, we have car accidents. I have 17 car accidents waiting to be submitted for highway reimbursement until the new year. So like last year's numbers, we topped out at 1,544 when you add the missed calls in. This year alone, Madison has been in our city 140 times this year, just for EMS calls, because we're missing calls. So we started doing the double ambulance staffing. So far, the 2 months data that I don't have December data yet, but in October, November, we captured 24 calls that we would have missed. And the amount that we spent in LTE wages, we doubled in revenue. So it cost us $5,000 in LTE wages to do that double staffing. And we've collected, and this is based on average reimbursement. If they're paying through insurance, we actually get full reimbursement. But based on the average of X amount of calls divided into the revenue we've gained this in collected revenue, that's what I use for revenue, that we're averaging $428 a call. So that's what I multiply that by, is $10,500 of revenue just in 2 months. So I understand the financial situation in the city. We have to staff a second ambulance. I worked Friday and Monday, it's a holiday for the city, to make sure we had a second ambulance in service, because Friday we had 9 calls. Monday we had 7 calls. This call that Madison just took is call number 7 for us today. We're very, very busy. We've got to get a second ambulance in service. So when it comes to budget next year, that's what you're going to hear from me is I've got to have staff. I understand we're talking operational referendum and all that. I have to have staff. So even on work reduction days where I've got my staff working 48 hours a week now, our LTEs are in those days, so we have a second ambulance in service during the day, because we've got to have it. So despite us being down on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays with a person being on a work reduction day, LTEs are in during the day, so we can still staff 2 ambulances during the day. Most of our missed calls happen during the day. So reducing their hours didn't cost the city anything coverage wise. We're providing 2 ambulances specifically on those days. But at this point, we're at almost a 8.5% increase overall this year in call volume from last year. It's just really, really busy. So the other thing that the double ambulance staffing provides is it actually eases the burden on the staff because they're not running all these calls. So now if I have 2 ambulances in service and I have 8 calls, now each of my staff is taking 2 calls instead of 2 people taking 4 calls each and not getting any sleep at night. So you're gonna hear more of it. We've had a good luck again this month in doing double staffing. We've already got January set up to do a bunch of weekday double staffing. But I started this as the process to start getting the data to show that we've got. I can say we need a second ambulance. I mean, I said it the month after I started. Why don't we have a second ambulance in service here? We're busy. This is the data collection portion to show that this is why we need a second ambulance. It's not just me saying it because our people are lazy or they don't want to work or we need to add staff just to add staff. We're by far the busiest ambulance in the county when it comes to our size of our city. There's nobody even close. So as we go forward, you'll get more of that. There's a whole page dedicated to the council report every month just for this double ambulance staffing. You can see what I'm staffing, how I'm staffing, calls we're catching, revenue we're making. I'm happy to provide that to this group as well, so you guys have an idea of what we're doing. But I wanted to make sure you're aware of it. So beyond the 2 alders, which I know they're aware of it because I talk about it all the time. That's if you hear double ambulance staffing, that's what it's for, is we're trying to get more coverage in the daytime.
Could you please say in like 1 or 2 sentences, the definition of double ambulance staffing? You mean when you, I'll let you speak.
Yeah, so currently we staff 1 ambulance 24/7. It's 2 of our full-time staff or however it works. We have 1 staffed ambulance 24/7. What we are attempting to do is staff both of our ambulances during the daytime. And the way I've got our out plan written, we can staff by any means necessary that second ambulance. We prefer 2 medics, which is why I step on quite a bit, because otherwise that second ambulance can only go in service if 60 is out.
So it doesn't mean you're doubling up on the staff. It means you have you have 2 physical vehicles. Correct. And you need to staff both vehicles.
More consistently.
It's just the double and okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, most of our double staffing is at the medic level. So we try and get both ambulances in service at the medic level because then we can alternate calls. So if I have 60 in service and 62 in service, both with 2 medics, 60 takes the first call, 62 takes the second call, and we alternate. Otherwise, if it's me and one of my advanced or an EMT, 60 takes a call, I can put 62 in service then and take another call or a second call. But then I go back out of service because the way our plan is written, our first out ambulance has to be a double medic staffed ambulance. I have to have 2 paramedics on it. So if I don't have both at a double medic level, I can't alternate. I can help cover secondary calls, but most of our staffing is a double medic. So our LTs have been very good about working those 10-hour shifts. They seem to like those. We're getting a lot of feedback that they like those shifts. So
the report, so the point you're making is about staffing.
Yeah.
Not about another physical ambulance.
Yeah.
But it is also about that.
That new ambulance is coming in.
I'm hearing, yeah.
Yes, that new ambulance is coming in. It will be in July 24 that gets delivered.
Yeah.
And in talking with the mayor, we're keeping that 3rd ambulance because as we get 2 ambulances in service more frequently, we have to have a backup ambulance. Yeah. And that one will be strictly a reserve ambulance. Won't even have a cot on it. Likely it'll be put into service if we need it for maintenance or today or this week's a good example. Medic 62 was having problems. What is today? Today's Wednesday. Monday we had extra staffing. So we had both rigs in service, we had a car accident call, and the belt line sounded bad, went starting 62 with the center. Dead. So that right away, well, I have people I'm paying to be there. I don't have an ambulance to put them on, which we got it back and running and all that. But that's why we need that reserve rig. So if there is a maintenance issue, we have a rig to be able to put in service as we add more of these double staffing days. So the way the LTE stuff is based in 23, we're gonna have double staffing hours available Monday, Wednesday, and Friday every week. So I'm trying to add 2 LTEs each of those days, but if I only get one, then I'll staff the second ambulance with the LTE. So we'll have 2 ambulances in service.
And really want to keep the meeting moving. I get it. I just, one more question. So how does what you just told us now about the need for more staff, and then the discussion in point B about the new staff that you're getting? Is
The volunteers.
So,
They can help staff a secondary ambulance. So what I always tell my volunteers, and my EMT volunteers is I will staff an ambulance with anybody. I've been doing paramedic for a very long time. Very confident in what I do. I will take the brand newest EMT and we will run calls. But again, what that allows me to do is catch secondary calls in and not alternate with full-time staff. So there will be some of that, but it's also whether or not they can work 7 to 5. Those are the hours that we're targeting. So it's hard to get volunteers to come in consistently. Then we have to be very careful about what we put into service. So let's say if I have an EMT running with me, 62 is not in service. It'll jump into service and take a call if we get one after 60's gone out. But if I put us in as medic 62, which I have to if I'm on board because I'm a paramedic, we responded to Madison. And Madison only allows double medic units to respond into them. That's the way that they set up their mutual aid. So we can respond in with our units because we're double medic, but I can't put myself in service as a single medic because if we get tapped for Madison, that violates the ALS agreement that we have with the city. So I'm happy to explain more offline.
sure,
for you.
yeah, no, that's fine.
But yes, they will help somewhat.
It'll help, but not enough, is
Yeah.
what I'm hearing. Okay,
Can I just?
Yeah.
Make one point, sort of, so on the police side, as I'm listening to this, and you and I have talked, there's only so much, if this was my scenario in which police from outside of Monona continually had to come into Monona, guaranteed you'd be getting a bill.
yeah,
Cause at some point, they're gonna say, you know, we're utilizing our resources for
Of
your
course.
community. You are responsible at your level of government
right,
to raise the funds to help support
Right.
this. So I'm guessing the city's loving the fact that they're getting money from billing some of the people, but I'm not sure how long that's sustainable.
right,
The discussions have already been raised.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was saying, yes.
yeah, right. Thank you for that. Chief, would you like to move on to the next item?
Certainly, this will be a much quicker one.
Okay,
This is just a quick update. So we ordered a brush truck. We did get a order number. We're waiting on the VIN. Once we have the VIN, we should be good to actually be able to track it, but it should be built in March from what our rep is saying, which is fantastic.
that's good.
I'll believe it if
Yeah, yeah.
it's slated to be delivered in 23, but she's like, oh, it's due to be manufactured in 23.
Huh.
Well, then give me the VIN. I don't have that yet. Then she's saying it's March. I'll believe when I get the VIN, I can check it myself. So that should actually be in service probably June, July-ish. It'll be built pretty quick. We're not fancy, so it'll be, we have a lot of the stuff we already need for it. That will then become our primary out when we have both ambulances staffed. So if we have a fifth, so my 3 full-time staff are working and I have both ambulances in service, the brush truck is what will respond instead of the engine. I've got to figure out a way to reduce the wear on our big truck because they're running way too much and they cost a lot of money, which feeds into the next line item, which we'll talk about in a second. But the engine, just so you're all aware, I'm giving you all a very early heads up, 24 to 36 month lead time for us to order that. Well, but to understand, we have to sign a contract. So it's not a matter of I want to order it, but I'm not going to sign a contract until 24. They won't even put you in the build. With that, if the price is right, we'll see. Pierce is doing a lot of wheeling and dealing because I called our last digital lemon. If the price is right, Pierce allows a 10% prepayment discount. So if we pay up front, they chop 10% off the price, and when it's $500,000, $50,000 is a nice benefit. That being said, that means that has to be built into the 24 budget instead of 25. So I'm just giving you a very early heads up. We're still in very early stages of looking. We have another organization coming in next month to talk about theirs, but regardless of who it is, it's 24 to 36 months to get a truck.
And because of the building, these fire trucks need to be built to a custom size. Which is
This
more
particular
expensive.
truck, is actually gonna be cheaper.
Okay,
I'm all about finding good deals, so, the truck that's being replaced is our smaller engine anyway.
okay.
So the one we're specing out is actually smaller than that. Height is not an issue, width is not an issue, length is shorter than what we've got. With the idea that we're trying to make it easier for people to want to drive the truck. When you walk down and see engine 2 sitting there and it's enormous, it's 10 foot high and it's 40 feet long. New people are like, I'm never driving that thing. They'd rather drive the ladder because it looks less intimidating. The idea behind this will be a commercial chassis, so it'll be more of a standard truck look instead of the cab over. But it's shorter, so easier for newer people to drive. It drives more like a car than folks that aren't used to the cab over design. But because of that, it's also cheaper. So, that leaves me in, again, if nobody has any question, it'll lead me right into the next point, which is the truck maintenance stuff. Just be aware, the maintenance budget for this year is so far out of whack that it's not even, we're at $52,000 in vehicle maintenance this year. Engine 4 alone, which is, it feeds into our replacement schedule. 20 years is what it always was with the volunteer department. That ain't gonna cut it anymore. We're gonna have to replace these engines faster. This year alone, we spent $25,000 on our backup engine.
This is the lemon we're referring to.
No, this is the one that's being replaced in a couple years. But by ISO standards, I have to have that engine in service. 25 grand this year. The last one was $8,000 for an injector pump that went bad. Just old. It's an old 20-year-old diesel engine. So the discussion is we replace this engine. If we use a commercial chassis, it's cheaper, but we're gonna have to shorten the replacement cycle to probably 15 years. The call volume 20 years ago is not the call volume of today, unfortunately. So the ladder we can probably still leave at the longer because it's used less. I mean, we use it a lot, but not like an engine. But the ladder, the engines, we're gonna have to reduce the replacement cycle on them. It's gonna be closer to 15 rather than 20, which once this gets closer to the reality of purchasing, we'll have a better description of what's being replaced when. I'm already working on an updated schedule. But yeah, the ladder 3 bill I just got today was almost $11,000. And it's still gonna be another 5 or 6 in January to get the frame straight. There was a accident with the back end of it and it actually bent the frame slightly, so it has to go up on the frame rack and get straightened, which I won't know the cost of until January. But that we're actually gonna file under insurance and try and get some of that back as an accident. Because overall it was almost $10,000 for the repairs for that. But that being said, the annual maintenance alone is $6,000 or $7,000 for them to do the DOT inspection, the chassis maintenance, the aerial inspection, the waterway testing, the pump testing. It's thousands of dollars for that to be done annually. So just letting you know, we did bring in enough, Alder Thomas as well. We did bring in enough this year in the general fund to cover that overage. So the sale of Squad 5, the old squad was $22,500. The state highway reimbursement, we added almost 20,000 to the budget on that. So we did add money to the budget to offset some of that. And next year's budget will be a little bit higher, but just be aware it is way high this year. It's high every year, but there was a lot of deferred maintenance that's being taken care of. So go team.
So
All the trucks in that service running.
Is there a question from Alder Thomas?
are we going to go over the budget, chief, and do we need to make a budget amendment?
I don't think so. I think with what because that maintenance line item is in the general fund. So I think
Okay.
it'll be okay, because I think Mark can just apply everything else that we did overage wise on revenue is also general fund money. So I'll talk to him and see if he needs to do a budget amendment or if he's just gonna apply it there.
Okay, because I'm a real stickler for, if we're going over the budget, we gotta do a budget amendment, but,
Yep, I'm okay with that too. I'll ask him what he wants to do with that, so.
okay, so ask Mark if we're okay with the budget or if we need to do an amendment,
Perfect.
okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any other questions about the points that Chief McClellan brought up? All right, hearing none, let's move on to item number 7, updates and discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and efforts. Is there anyone that would like to share anything here?
I'm happy to, very
Yeah.
quickly. I would say with this fresh cohort of volunteers,
Yeah.
we're rapidly approaching 50% male to female ratio at the fire department. I think we'll be at 39. If these other two pan, it'll be at like at 42. One of them, one young lady is an Asian American lady, which is, she's fantastic. She's in school at UW. The young lady I'm dealing with, from the high school as well. So we're working to broaden our appeal to, which is why I love doing stuff to school. It's a good diverse group of folks to hang out with. So we had a fun time.
That is great. That is just great. Anything from anyone else? I think I mentioned earlier that at the last council meeting, I was appointed to the city's diversity, equity, inclusion implementation team. We have not yet met, but we'll be doing that soon. I'm really looking forward to that. Any others? All right, if not, let's have number 8, reports. Starting off with fire department.
I have 8 bullet points and they're all short, I promise. We're getting there. So, flex grant, first half we've received, which was $38,750. It was applied to the ambulance chassis project. We'll submit the expense report after the first of the year to get the second half, which will take care of the rest of that. And then do some overtime for extra staffing and some LT hours as well. The extra money we received from the FAP program from the state, which was $24,192, I think. The first half that we have in hand, we're buying narcotic safes for all the ambulances, which is a identified lack between both myself and medical direction. When I started, the narcs were literally just in the bag. No lock, no anything, they were just sitting in the bag. So we're buying narcotic safes to go in each truck. That's where they'll be stored going forward. They're not cheap, but the extra money will actually cover that. We're also paying for the new learning management system that we have set up for the membership. The second half, once that comes in, we're working new jump bags for all the trucks. The jump bags are 9 years old. And the one that we currently have on the ambulance is actually heavier than some of my staff.
What's a jump bag?
All of our equipment, basically, the bag that we take in, it's like 92 pounds. So from a risk management standpoint, we're gonna break that apart and get some new bags. And then we're also getting some, it's called PS Track software, which is more orientation checklist, monitoring stuff. And we have some training items we're gonna pick up with that as well. Every dollar will be spent. The state wants to give, we're gonna spend every dollar. The FAP funding itself that we received last year, which was $8,000, which is our normal allotment we get. We've so far paid for 2 EMT basic classes for two new individuals that are getting, that are either on the service or joining the service. And we also were able to cover the first semester of paramedic tuition for one of our volunteers. Who was finishing that, and we helped her and worked with Ignite from Madison Fire, along with some other places. She's actually getting some scholarships. So her second semester tuition will be under $1,000. Everything else is covered by scholarships. We had a big fire, if you didn't know, out on Cops Avenue. Really great response, early morning response. We had 9 volunteers, along with our 3 full-time staff. I did schedule that to happen while I was on vacation. Chief Eckloff did a fabulous job running the scene. We put out a loss of $500,000. It's likely going to exceed that once the insurance company is done with it. CPR training. We did CPR for all of our fire department members in November, and this month in December we did all of our public safety partners. So all of our police officers just got trained, and our dispatchers got trained. Next month and into February we're working on expanding the role of our officers, because again, we're a small city and where we can expand, we will. Where our cops can get there first, and do something that's life-saving. So tourniquets, rescue breathing, the high performance CPR, Narcan is gonna be deployed to all of our officers. We're building individual, rescue kits for all 21 of our full-time officers. So it'll be assigned to them, they'll be responsible for making sure stuff stays in date. If it gets used, we can bill for it with the patient and replace it for them. But the idea being that we can extend our reach a little bit because of how busy we are, that if an officer gets there first, there's life-saving things that they can do that our medical director will sign off on that will help until somebody else gets there. And that includes themselves. Tourniquets for our officers, they deal with fentanyl, carfentanil, any of those drugs that they have the ability to be able to deploy these life-saving techniques for themselves as well. So it's not just citizens, but also for our staff as well, we keep them safe. And two quick notes, I'll be up in Duluth at the end of January. I should be here for the meeting. I think I leave Thursday for Arrowhead up in Duluth. Really cold. But I also want to make sure that this body is aware of, well, that is being paid out of my pocket. I could put it back in the city, but I won't. I enjoy this conference. It's a good conference, even if it is in Duluth in January. And then in the following, we come up in Green Bay at WMSA. I'm actually speaking at WMSA. And because of that, they're covering the conference cost. So the city just paying for the hotel room for me to be up there. So some really good stuff. Looking forward to it. But that is all I have, and I'm going to be quiet and let the chief speak.
Thank you. Hey, Barry.
All right, thank you. It's been a while, so good seeing everyone. Hopefully everyone had a good holiday and is gonna enjoy the new year. I promise you this isn't a wine session here, but my first comment
Only
is,
brought cheese.
yeah, my first comment is in regards to the chief's last point about conference and how he's paying out of pocket. I can tell you that the chief and I are both in similar situations in which, you know, priority goes to our team. But I think it's important for the city to recognize the importance of having your leadership attend trainings and be in front of, be ahead of sort of things that are trending. And so when we talk to our colleagues and they hear that we're paying for our own trainings, it's something that I don't think is sustainable. I'll just leave it at that. And I think that the city really needs to think about investing in not only the rank and file, which is obviously the chief and I's priority, but as well as your chief. So we stay on our game. So I will be attending a conference in Wisconsin Dells. I'll be commuting each day so as to save the city money, and I'm not fronting money for that. So instead I'm using city fuel.
You did remind me, if I can interrupt
Yeah,
shortly,
yeah.
I have one more announcement to make. So those of you that have been on the committee for a while, remember we sent a team out to FDIC last year. They competed. I asked if they wanted to go out again this year, and they said no. Too stressful. But what I got a couple weeks ago was a phone call from the director of the GEMS games, Jeff Frankel, asking if we were going to compete. And I said, well, no, that they decided not to come this year. And he's like, well, I'm glad, because I'd like to have him come out and actually help us do the GEMS games.
Wow.
They made quite an impact on the leadership team out there. So they invited our 3 women to come out. They will pay for their conference in full. The ladies will travel on their own and do their own meals. So the city's just going to cover the hotel for them, and which I could be an Airbnb, because hotels are.
Yeah.
Just for 2 of the 3 are going, but just for the 2 of them, we would have $4,000 for the hotel. So really cool stuff. Really neat to see that our folks made such an impact on the leadership team out there that they called to invite them to come actually put the games on. And plus they get the training for free.
Is it
So-
in Indy again?
It is in Indy again. It's always in Indianapolis. So very proud of my team. I wish the 3rd could go, but she's got a full-time job now, so she was unable to make that work. But sorry to interrupt, Chief.
No,
That's
that is great. I'm
is.
glad that you remembered to that because you and I.
That should be recognized.
Oh, I'm gonna
It
be
will
good. So Boya.
Because I was following this, I was like,
Yeah.
oh.
How can someone watch the competition? Like, how can we see our folks in action? Is it televised?
Yeah,
Is it
it's a live
recorded?
stream.
Is it live streamed? I would love to see that. And
I will make sure that you get the
that would
live
be
stream for it.
so cool. All right.
So on the topic of training, segueing off the wine session, I've implemented a new program within the agency. It's goal setting. It's doing away with sort of, I don't know, trying to find the right word for our current evaluation system. There's no perfect evaluation system that exists, particularly in public safety. It's very challenging, more so for police, in my opinion, because we can't establish things like quotas and ticket counts and things like that. So it's challenging to measure. Instead, what I found to be beneficial is a program of goal setting. The department, I established the goals for 2023. The section, so patrol section or investigative section of dispatch, their commanders establish sort of the section goals, and then the individual comes up with their own personal professional goals, and how that all aligns with the others. As a bit of sort of cost savings that I'm trying to work into, or I did work into for next budget season, I've eliminated our participation in 2 training consortium teams. We're part of a training consortium, the police department is, with other agencies. That comes at a cost. There's 5 that we've traditionally done in a year. When you pull people from the street, you often have to backfill them. There's overtime costs, there's costs to put on that training. They are getting training. So instead of the 5, they're going to 3 consortium training. The other 2 trainings, one of which is going to be a training on their own, if it's a reasonable cost and if it's something that aligns with their professional goals and the department's goals and the section goals, we'll try to get them there. And then the other is an in-house training that we're going to do for our staff, and that's TPD. It's going to be a combination of some practical training and then some classroom lecture and instruction. We all just went through workplace harassment training. We brought in our insurance provider for that. I think that's critically important, and as I'm told, well overdue, not because of an incident or a case, but it's something that I think all of us need to continue to have. And bloodborne pathogen training, which is very important because, as the chief mentioned, we come across a lot of stuff. And actually, it's interesting when you put a topic like that in front of your staff, it's like, oh, here we go. I'm going to have to figure out, I'm going to make it through bloodborne pathogens. It's not the most exciting training that you can have, but CIVMIC put on a very engaging training, both topics. So we sat in this room and I walked away learning some things from both topics, which is great. So that's a training that we had. We will continue to sort of evaluate this goal setting. It's involving a supervisor sitting one-on-one with the employee, going over the goals for the department, the section, and then helping them formulate their own individual goals. And then the supervisor has onus on not only documenting, but articulating with the employee how they're going to help them get there, and how this organization, how this department, how this city is going to help them get there for the betterment of the employee, but also the city. Obviously, it will reap benefits. So we'll see how that goes. I have personal experience with that in my previous job. That was done away with a new chief, and this is what happens when new chiefs come in. So that's goal setting policies. We have our official rollout date for policy, barring any technological issues. As you all are aware, we've been working through Lexipol policies. They're all done. They're all done. I've pushed them out to the organization. There's a process in which they read them, they hit the acknowledgement button, which means you are now hereby liable, responsible for said policy, but there's hundreds of them. So I gave them a month. We've had a couple of technological glitches in between there, where a couple officers never got the sign-on access, but we worked them out. They have until January 15th, in which I will hereby rescind the other general ordinance and policies, and we will be going to this new format. What we're going to do at that time is that our assistant chief, who is hopefully enjoying a wonderful vacation at this time, well deserved and overdue, will be putting all of that online in a PDF searchable format. There will be some editing that takes place. You will not have access to every word in every policy, because some policies are law enforcement sensitive. Bomb threat response and things like that we don't want everyone to know about. But for the most part, you will have access to every policy that's been implemented. So that's been a big undertaking, and I just want to give an update on that since we haven't met in a while. I can breathe a sigh of relief with that. And our insurance provider is also very happy that we're getting through these policies. A thank you campaign here real quick. Thank you to the fire department. That's time out of their hands that they have to do in between calls to help us out with certifying our officers and BLS CPR. And they did that 24 hours a day for our night crew, even to get certified. So it involved the fire department using their funds to pay for the online portion, the testing portion, and then their staff to physically be present to watch us demonstrate what we learned. Some of us were a little rusty. Speaking of myself here, some of us have sat in an office for a while where we haven't had to use those skills, but I'm out all the time even as chief. And it's beneficial for me to have these skills, but also any one of us, heaven forbid, have an emergency in which we have to help our coworker out and resuscitate a coworker. So thank you, Chief, for that and your ongoing communication with our medical director and future training that's going to be happening first quarter. Two more thank yous. The badge campaign is doing well over $6,000. Thank you to Lieutenant Weigel, who's been on a very big push to reach out to any and all potential donors. It's been very, very helpful. I can't tell you how excited the officers are to have a Monona unique badge and not a cookie cutter badge that you can buy off of Amazon. It's very symbolic. It represents the trust that you all place in us and the confidence that we all have to do our jobs here for the city. And so when we stand next to Fitchburg, we stand next to Oregon with their fancy badges, we stand next to Madison, we can now wear our badges proud. So we should hopefully be getting those next month or early February. Fingers crossed.
What do you have left on that for the campaign?
We have a couple $1,000, probably $2,500 or so. Right, Kurt, am I right? Are we close to that, or 3,000 you're in?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Weigel, were all of the city council members, did you reach out to everyone, or maybe I missed an email?
Oh, would you like to be reached out individually?
I would like to be
Okay.
invited
So-
to contribute.
Thank
I
you
can
very
certainly
much.
do that.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. You all certainly got it, because you're the first people I thought of. But not necessarily for contributing, which I thank
Yeah.
you very much, but just to get the word out.
Yeah,
So it has been posted. Kurt is more savvy than I am with social media, so he found a way to
okay,
keep it permanently posted on our front page of our Facebook account.
okay,
I think it may have been shared on Nextdoor.
yeah,
And we've gotten the word out through the senior center, through a variety of other people that we've tried to get the word out. And that's, I think, why in part we've been able to raise $6,000. And these badges are 100 and something bucks a piece. But the cool thing about these badges and why we're going with this particular company is because there's a lifetime warranty. So if they're damaged in the line of duty, et cetera, the city doesn't have to necessarily, well, we pay shipping costs, but outside of that, we wouldn't have to be paying for a brand new badge. They back them with a lifetime guarantee. So that's great. Shop with a Cop was successful. We raised close to $3,000 for that as well. Thanks to our community relations officer for really helping to advertise for that and collect funds and go door to door, et cetera. That was a successful event, helped a lot of young kids. The kids were, and names and families were provided to us by Winnebago School, who reached out to the families to ask for if they would want to participate. And several said yes. And so we were able to get kids as young as I think 5 years old, which was somewhat challenging for some of our officers to manage through Walmart with a 5-year-old. Those of you who have young kids or have had young kids. But it was a successful campaign. A couple more things here. Recruitment to our PFC commissioner who's here with us. I'm going to send something out to PFC president with respect to an update on hiring and their status, particularly the eligibility list. We had the PFC authorized three potential police officers qualified to hire. Rank them 1 through 3. Our number 2 has since gotten a job elsewhere, and so he's rescinded. He's withdrawn from the process, so that leaves us with a very capable and very qualified number 1 and number 3, who's now number 2. Both of those will be attending the Black Hawk Academy One is being sponsored by an anonymous donor, because she's a former intern and a current part-time dispatcher who highly impressed a member of the community, and they are covering the cost for her. She's not in the situation to pay for it herself. It is a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday commitment, and they don't want you working outside of that. And so you pretty much have to drop everything to attend the police academy. It's very challenging. She is being sponsored, and our number 3, now number 2, Carter Losby, is sponsoring himself. So he is finding out a way to get through the academy himself, with our support, of course, and making sure that he gets through the process too, because we anticipate there will be 2 vacancies in 2023 due to retirement. So we want to be lined up, ready to go, get them into training, and reap the benefits of them as officers in our rank and file, so as not to overwhelm our current staff with overtime and unwanted overtime. Speaking of unwanted overtime, and the chief knows this as well, all of you do too, we are still in a pandemic. We have officers out or their families out, which means they are out with COVID, or this funky RSV thing that's going around with kids and or non-kids. It's flu season, and so we're doing okay, but there's likely not a week or half a week that goes by where we're not asking for somebody to pitch in due to a sick-up due to the pandemic or one of the other plagues that's going around. I think, I just want to mention too, and I'll do so on behalf of the fire chief. Both of the associations, both fire and police, signed a contract with the city. It's a 1-year contract. I give credit to the members from both and their leadership and the membership. It's a tough budget season, as we all know. Everyone's looking around us to communities that are growing and are getting more revenue, and we're not one of them quite yet. And seeing that everyone else is getting raised, or they're getting this, or they're getting new equipment, or they're getting new PD. And we're motivating our folks to say, hang in there. Here's why we're fun. Here's why it's great to work here. Here's all the other wonderful benefits, because there are, of why to work here. But I think it's important for all of you to recognize that that's only going to work so long. That's only going to be sustainable.
Best they ever only go so far.
So long. I think the city did its part, meeting what it needed to do this year. I speak obviously as a department head. I think the unions were very reasonable, sort of with what they came with the table and agreed to based on the circumstances of the city and understanding. They paid attention to city council meetings. They pay attention to meetings such as these, as PSC. But I want to encourage all of you to please keep that in mind, that I know we're small. I love the fact that we're small. I love the fact that I interviewed with the PSC and all of you in this community to work here. Not a day goes by I don't brag about this place, comma, but. The comma, but is we need to make sure our people are treated well. You all do a wonderful job, but in the future, as we look at referendums and talking budget, remember the people, remember what helps make this city great, and then particularly our realm, what keeps it so safe. And it's the people who, I would never guess that I would be competing with the Dane County Sheriff's Office. I love them. I'm friends with the sheriff. I'm friends with other people. I would never guess that somebody would be actually considering leaving the police department where there's, it's kind of cool, the stuff we go to, right? When you think about what the average street cop does. I would never think that a cop would consider leaving to go work inside of a jail. But the chief and the county have enticed them. There's time off potentially there in addition to what they're getting here, more than what we would be able to offer. And there's obviously the monetary factor. They're paying them more too. You kind of have to do that if you want to keep people working the jail. We all I'm a county taxpayer too, so we all see benefit of what they're doing. Problem is that they're robbing from some other communities and they're knocking on our door. So I'm doing all I can to keep our folks here. They are still motivated. They're all in it for the right reasons still. I'm not worried that I'm gonna have a mass exodus of people. But, sooner or later, all the tricks in the hat are gonna go bye-bye.
That's not buying a dozen eggs.
Jerry and I,
Yep.
I like to think that we're pretty creative people. We like to have fun. We like to be engaging. We are, I don't think there's any doubt that Jerry's a motivator. I like to think of myself as being a motivational person from time to time. Even with a bad day, I wear a smile on my face, right? But I talk about the bad days and how to get help, etc. That's only gonna last so long. So I just wanted to be open, honest, transparent with everyone. And obviously we'll be having those discussions with council. The current council is keenly aware of our situation. And I've obviously talked to the mayor too and our city administrator, our current acting city administrator about what does the future look like for us? Because our staff is wondering. And our staff, my staff in particular, yours are young.
My staff, yeah.
Who are having young families and the opportunities are looking left and looking right and they're weighing their options. And I am, and so is Chief McMullen, we're wanting to keep them here because it is a great place. So I don't know if I stepped on somebody.
And then we can't pay for you to go to a conference. That just bothers me.
As long as my folks get to go and do what they need to do, I'm okay with that, so.
You can only do that. You can only ask someone to do.
Well, that's actually, and I will say that, I pay for that on my volunteer dollar, so. And that's my EMF money, so.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Chief Cheney. Is there, it says building and code inspection if applicable. Is
If
it
we-
applicable?
If we've asked them to be here, Elder, I believe that that's why that's not.
Okay, and then 8D, Police and Fire Commission.
Yes, we have the meeting on January 23rd for the fire position. You should hear from Tom, and you're trading emails on it today, so
Perfect.
we'll nail down a time and you
I've
can get
got
that
the letter ready, I'm just waiting for the date and time, so
Yep.
I can officially notify.
at any moment now, I'm sure, and that's the update.
Thank you. All right, our next meeting is January 25th. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Feel better, Kathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's not me, it's my son,
The
my
house.
daughter, my husband, my daughter-in-law, all have COVID.
No.
Yep, that's why she's not
And,
here.
I don't have it so
Yeah.
far,
But everybody around you has it.
Yeah.
and I'm living with him. So, Chief Cheney, I'm going to talk to you because we seem to have at least one member, maybe two, but one, who are not attending the meetings. And I need to talk to them about whether they're still interested in serving, because it's not fair to the rest of the members to show up and not have other people do it. So either you're interested or you're not.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you know who I'm talking about.
I do. I can tell you that what they've presented to me, in my opinion, were valid excuses, at least for this meeting. Out of their respect for their privacy, I won't mention that, but.
They're required to be at, if they're missing a certain number of meetings, and the chair needs to talk to them. So I will do
Yep.
that and I'll talk to you about it.
Thank you. I'm going to stop recording, everyone.
Mm.
And everyone have a good